Welcome to the Unearthed Man Podcast, the journey becoming a conscious man. Hey all, Stephen here, and welcome to episode 56 of the Unearthed Man Podcast. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode with Andrew. I love his passion for being a music man and have had the privilege of being woken up at 5 a.m. by his dulcet tones. There are worse ways to wake up, and that is for sure. My story today is very relevant to my guest. He occupies a fantastic piece of land called Tanderrum in central Victoria, Australia. Now, he may need to correct me, however, from listening to his stories, Tanderrum means place of gathering. It's where First Nations peoples travelling from the north towards the south for trading purposes would stop after being welcomed in by the custodians of that land. Before moving on, they were provided food, water, and a resting place. This welcoming was a smoking ceremony to cleanse the visitors of any negative energy they were carrying. This beautiful tradition is still practiced today. This place is well known for the men's business that used to be conducted due to the terrain and lookouts. This is important to note, as in First Nations culture, men's business was conducted up in the hills and mountains, whereas women's business was conducted down in the valleys and rivers. This enabled men to see across the land they maintained and protected and observed the arrival of neighbouring or visiting mobs. Off the back of this, I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands we now occupy and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. Now, here are a few things to run through before we kick off with today's guest. First up, the Unearthed Men community, made up of men willing to support and be supported by other men, continues to grow. If you're a man or know of a man who is seeking his tribe or his community, then please use the link in the show notes below to sign up. Alternatively, you can send me a message via any of my social media channels. Secondly, please subscribe to the podcast via your preferred app and leave a review. The quickest way to enable the podcast to become more accessible worldwide is to receive a 5-star review. By doing this, you also acknowledge and thank my guests for their time, effort, and wisdom. And finally, expressions of interest for my 8-week men's empowerment program are still open. If you have that deep inner feeling that there is more to life than this, or you constantly feel irritated and frustrated and have lost track of who you are, this may be the program for you. We can at least jump on a call and see what I can do to help. As a reminder, I'm only taking 10 men into each 8-week program this year. Therefore, if you are interested, click the link below to join the wait list as it is filling fast. All right, on to today's episode. My guest today is a beautiful, heart-led man. I had the chance to meet him in person at the same gathering we discussed last week, and we have formed a friendship ever since. The one thing that struck me immediately was his warmth. Father, son, identical twin, brother, uncle, partner, friend, creative director, producer, photographer, filmmaker, storyteller, traveller, journeyman, mentor, facilitator, jack of all trades, master of none. He has spent 25 plus years jet-setting around the corporate world. Working alongside CEOs and senior executives, he helps them access the heart of their organizations through powerful, strategic, creative delivery, enabling them to engage, connect, and unite more deeply with their people. He is passionate about life and the transformative power of men's work. A founder of Gathering Men, he is at home and on beautiful Djaara, Dja-Dja-Wurrung country. One of his favourite locations is at the top ridge at Tanderrum by the grandmother tree. This is a place of deep rest, deep peace, calm and connection, of many sunsets, moonrises, silence and simple gratitude. And I can certainly testify to this last one, having taken many trips to the top ridge, on one occasion in all my glorious nakedness. So I'd like to welcome to the Unearthed Man Podcast, Brett Ellenport. G'day, Brett. How are you, mate?
I'm really well, Stephen. And for the course of this conversation, I'm going to imagine you sitting there in your glorious nakedness on the top ridge. How's that?
I like that. That could be a scary thought for the listeners, but
fantastic. Well, it's great to be with you, mate, and it's also great to follow my brother and my partner in Gathering Men, songman Andrew McSweeney. Very privileged to be yakking to you and to be following him in the order of these podcasts.
Yeah, no, it was a great chat with Andrew last week to be able to go through and just his journey and his passion for being a songman, and just how he keeps diving back into what's love look like, and what's love look like for me, and what do I love to do, giving him that direction. That was just a really great chat. And I don't know, you and him have a beautiful relationship and spend many times having just open conversations together.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a beautiful symbiosis, I think, working together in what we bring as gathering men together, but also hanging out as mates. And I think we challenge one another, definitely, and we have that bond and closeness in a relationship to be able to do that. And we learn from one another, and that's got to be the I guess perhaps the definition of a close friendship, someone who can challenge you, and that you can allow that person, to challenge you and be challenged, as well as share whatever the wisdom is that I carry, and be able to work together and to create something different from the sum of the parts. And so important.
Absolutely. And the one thing that I noticed about you and Andrew is that you are different yet the same. And that's what I love. Like, you come from two different angles, but ultimately this sameness about, wanting to get to a place of, heart-led, a calm peace, and being able to share that with other men. The one thing that is just, as soon as I've arrived, and I've had the opportunity to be in your presence many times, but certainly when we do the Gathering Man up in Tanderrum, you just drop in, you go, I am immediately safe. Like, I am immediately held, I'm immediately safe. And that's the environment that you both have been able to bring in. But I think you bring that safety from two different angles. And I think where men come, there might be men might align more to, where Andrew's coming from, and others might align more to where you're coming from. But either way, that symbiotic relationship just builds that, that beautiful cone of safety that I think enables men to be more open and just slowly put down the barriers.
Sure.
So yeah.
Absolutely. And it is all about that container that you're referencing. Without the safety of a container where men like yourself, first of all, feel welcome, and we'll perhaps talk a little bit about what you mentioned there with Tanderrum and the concept of Tanderrum, but being held safely on country, firstly feeling welcomed, secondly feeling safe, and thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, just feeling loved. So what does it mean today in 2023 as a man to be welcomed into a space where you don't have all the usual paraphernalia around you? You don't have the alcohol, and you don't have the smartphones, though they're not particularly smart sometimes in our lives. You don't have the all the distractions of the drugs and the cigarettes and the whatever else it might be. That is that thing in my life that I use as a bit of a distraction, or as we call it, a bit of a disconnect, really.
Yeah.
So in the work that we do, it's all about doing exactly what you're talking about. It's bringing fellows together on country and allowing them to feel safe and loved and welcome without any of those disconnectors, and then seeing what happens in that space when men are allowed to and encouraged to lean into what is to their joy, but also to whatever pain that they're carrying, and just to allow that to flow out through them across time on country, and it's just so important that men and women, of course, at this time, but it's particularly the men that we're working with, are allowed to give up all that stuff that they feel they have to do in their daily life, and to reconnect in a way that my sense is they remember. Yeah, it's there in them, but they have to remember what it can be like, and it's just such a beautiful shedding of the stuff that I hold in that space, and then there's such a beautiful seeding of all the things that I love to do.
Yeah, and I love all that. And just on that point, what I'd like to go do, and I think you somewhat touched on that, is I want to get into the conversation, at where you are now, but I think we would sort of get towards as the end. We're all born, with this love and openness and willing to be there, and then something happens along the way where we actually that all gets shrouded and masked and covered off and conditioned, and then we come back out again, through spaces that you're talking about. So, part of this podcast is to be able to talk through, how we went from where we were to where we are and what went through. And I'd really like to sort of know more about your journey and sort of what sort of, has taken place within yourself. I mean, we covered off a lot of items about there, father, son,
Sure.
identical twin and everything else. So can you give the listeners a bit of an insight as to, how your journey came out to the fact that you can now be creating this safe space for other men?
Sure, absolutely. Wow. Well, listening to your introduction about me, I thought, wow, he sounds like an interesting guy. I'd like to hang out with that cat. And I think that's a really good place to start, because in the end, I think it's all about self-love. I think it's all about self-acceptance. And I owe it to myself, but I also owe it to the people around me who brought me up, my mother and my father, my brother and my sister, and the friends that were around me, the families and the friends that were around me, that allowed me to be who I was, and I'm so full of gratitude for the childhood that I had. It's a childhood that's distinctly lacking in trauma. It's a childhood where it wasn't an affluent childhood. There wasn't loads of money around, but there was a real sense of harmony and happiness in the house, and a lot of love. And it was a place where the simple things in life were truly the best. And oh, there's the dog. Welcome to Djaara, the Irish Terrier. I'm going to let her stand by.
Cool.
Go on, yeah.
And everyone listens in, as we know, like, this is an end-to-end record, and this is what's going to happen. So welcome to the world of animals. So we're back on.
Exactly.
Let's continue on.
That's right. Just when you think you've got it all worked out in life, suddenly it changes, just like that.
Correct.
So, my parents were also a little left of centre. I was a child of the 60s, the very late 60s, but born into the year of man landing on the moon and Woodstock and all those sorts of things, and I think it was the 70s in particular was a really beautiful time to be alive. And where I grew up, it was a safe place to grow up in the community. We rode our bikes to school. We had lots of friends. Most of our friends, or many of our friends, were women, young women at primary school. And so we had a healthy selection of girls and boys that we hung out with, and we were a real little posse, and we loved that. And so, growing up as a young kid in the Bayside suburbs of Melbourne, life was easy, and again, having heard so many men's stories now as a 50-something-year-old man, I realize just how lucky I was as a kid. And the link, I guess, into the work that I'm doing now, and someone asked me this the other day, they said, how long ago, Brett, did you find yourself playing this role of talking to men and holding space, if you like, with fellows to allow them to tell their stories? And for me, I think it was even in the playgrounds of primary school. I found myself, without trying to fix them or without trying to show them how it was done, listening to the underdog. So I would stick up for the guys who were being picked on or bullied at school, and I would step in where they couldn't step in. And I noticed that about myself. That was just part of who I was. My left-handedness and my right-brainness just took me to those places. And so, connection was super important to me as a kid, and that honesty and authenticity and the feelings, feeling the people around me in terms of understanding who they were and getting a deeper insight into the souls that I was spending my time with. So that's I guess a does that give you a bit of a feel for the young fella I was?
Yeah, no, definitely for the young fella, and I think that's that's a really nice for the primary, and then we get into secondary. I think the interesting thing, I know in my space, there was probably not much dissimilar maybe in those earlier, same, brought up in the country, primary school, riding the bike to and from school, and you're just out and you're free. And, as I would often say, sun comes up, disappear. The only time you might just come back is if you were hungry, get some food, and that could be any time during the day, and you'll be gone again. And when the sun goes down, you're going to come back.
Absolutely.
Sometimes the challenges that appear with us is getting into that teenage, university, those sort of things. So you want to talk through that, and as you go along, and so you get an identical twin, and what did that look like for you as you were sort of navigating through life?
Absolutely. Well, the identical twin thing is an absolute gift. It is such a gift, because I hung out with that guy, holding space for him and him holding space for me, for almost a year before we even made it out. And Jason was he's 5 minutes older than me, so he pushed me out. Well, he went out first. That means, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Went into the world a little earlier than me. I always get that bit wrong. But so I kicked him out. I just decided to have a sleep in, which is not uncommon for me. And
because I just on that point, if you want Brett to turn up at 1 p.m., tell him it's a 10 a.m. session. He'll probably just get there just on time. I love how casual and calm he is just in the round. So, yeah, we're going to get there. That's pretty cool. But then when he turns up in his presence, it's worth the wait. Sorry, continue on.
There you go. Well, and there'll be people smiling and grimacing all over the world listening to that if they truly know me. And, I do operate a little on Koori time, that's for sure. And I'm proud of that sometimes, but very aware that it gets in the way at other times. But look, just having a brother, I have many brothers in the world, and I have one true brother, my brother Jason, who I love dearly, and it's talk about symbiosis. It's a symbiotic relationship that is, it's the yin and the yang. We are the yin and the yang, and that's the way we were in the world, top and tailing in utero, which is such an amazing thing to think of, that closeness. And I think through the time you're asking about, through the formative years and teens, etc., we'd end up, at Christmas, at mum and dad's place, and we've stuffed ourselves with food and had one too many servings of Christmas pudding, and we'd end up on the couch together, in that position, top and tailed, both just gorged with tucker, and it would be this feeling that washed over us of just harmony, about being back in that space, being back in the same space together. And I can't actually describe what that's like, but it's a really beautiful, gentle feeling, and it's an incredibly safe space. So, yeah, I truly feel that that the privilege of being an identical twin, growing up with someone who knew me so well and knows me still today so well, and I him, it's such a beautiful thing to behold. It's such a beautiful gift, and I'll be forever, just enjoy with that. Not that it doesn't also have its challenges. As an identical twin, we were so often compared. The creative twin and the business twin, or the corporate twin and the creative twin, or whatever it is. People need to find differences in similarity. And and I'm okay with that. I'm good with that, and I'm sure Jason is too. But I'll tell you a little story about that. People often say to us as twins, well, the crazy question is, how do you know you're you? Which is a really difficult one to work with. But the second question is, when he feels pain, do you feel pain? It's that classic thing of twin do.
Yeah.
And my response to it is always that I'm not sure I quite believe in that, but with the way that nature and nurture works, the fact that we had a very similar upbringing, that we've got essentially the same DNA, the same fingerprints, all those sorts of things, that there's almost a sixth sense around what would happen, what would I do. So when Jason was small and he got lost in the botanical gardens, I was able to lead mum and dad to exactly where he was on the other side of the park, because I know what I would have done. And in some ways, it's been like that in life. We've been able to support one another when we've gone through difficult times, because we have such an insight into one another's spirit and into one another's genius, but also into one another's fears.
I like that. A shout out to Jason as well. I had my first gathering that I did with Brett and Andrew. Jason was there, so I had an opportunity to meet Jason, and we actually had an opportunity to spend some quality time together in just a listening space and a conversational space. And yeah, it was just a really super powerful opportunity. And yeah, since then, it takes subtle, small moments to build lifetime bonds. Like Jason and I connect here and there occasionally, but the one thing we'll always know, and we always had that energetic heart-to-heart connection purely for just spending that time in each other's presence, just being present and just listening and just being held by each other, being able to express where we were in life. And sometimes that's just the subtlest things in life that, we talk about lifetime friendships and we talk about lifetime connections, everything else. But, sometimes you don't have to have spent 12 or 14 years at school with somebody else to build that up. You could have just spent purely 30 minutes in presence with somebody else, and then now would your energetic heart to connect.
Absolutely.
And
it's
that
so
connection is there.
Beautifully said. And so brave of my brother to step into that space where, I'm holding space as a moderator, facilitator, as a participant, where he gets to step so bravely into that space and talk about who he is and what what he's sitting with. Amazing. Really took my hat off to him. And I totally agree with you that there are bonds and friendships that are made in that space of love and trust and safety that are held sacrosanct and that are lifelong. And Andrew and I we have a bit of a running gag, and it's that the hardest job in the world is to get men to head out in the bush together without any beer or mobile phones and talk about their emotions. I mean, we're up against it, right?
Yeah, correct.
In terms of the stereotypes. But I guess that's where it actually took a really tough moment for gathering men for the final spark to ignite the passions in both Andrew and I. And it was when Andrew lost a very dear friend to suicide. And I think it was a nephew of his at the funeral that said, "Hey, Uncle, we've got to do something here." And Andrew and I had some conversations around this and where our hearts were with opening up that safe, welcoming, loving space to men to talk about what it is to avoid, the terrible tragedy that is 7 of 9 suicides every single day here in Australia. It's just it's an epidemic in its own right. So, for us, it was about how do we create a fresh, new approach to health and well-being for Aussie guys? How do we craft something a little bit different? How do we welcome guys onto a new journey? And how might we reimagine a healthier masculinity? Because, so many of the examples around us, from politicians to rock stars to men in business, they just fell over as examples. They just weren't up to it. In fact, a lot of them were just totally toxic in terms of the way that men were going about it in society and are going about it and continue to go about it. So we got onto a pretty bold and pretty clear purpose around redefining what it means to be a healthy man and smashing some of the stereotypes around men's health and well-being. So that whole idea of reimagining a healthier masculinity, a healthier way of doing it, and really stepping in and going, right, now's our time. Now's your time, men. It's time actually just to check out and check in. Check out of all that is normal with all those distractions, and check back in here. Breathe out all that stuff and breathe in all of this stuff, all of this safety and this love and this welcome space. And just to drop the heavy stuff and tread a little lighter with ourselves and invite men into that space in a way that perhaps they haven't been before. So that guys like you and Jason could sit together and in a 15-minute exercise of deep listening, find something in one another and find something in yourselves as individuals that perhaps you haven't felt for a long time. That muscle, which is probably less about biceps, which is, the blokey stereotypical thing, and more about activating the heart muscles, about deep listening, about compassion, about deeper than deep listening with total intent to understand what it is that another human being who loves and feels and hurts, what it is that they're trying to communicate. And, what I notice is that as soon as men feel that safety and that love and that holding, that safe container, they're capable of anything. They're capable of some of giant transformation. And that's exciting.
I definitely agree, Brett. There was a couple of things that came up as you were talking through all that.
Sure.
When we go on site and we go gathering, we actually go camping, and that's what basically that's beautifully. There's a bit of solar there, and there's some dams, so it's quite rugged. And the interesting thing, as you're saying, the challenge is if you say to a group of men, hey, you want to head up the river, bring up your barbecue, your meat, your beer, your stuff, like, and we're going to go away and we're going to have this big camping weekend. Guys like, I'm in, let's go, the unhealthy masculinity. It's all the distractions and it's everything else.
Yeah.
And then you say to the same thing, hey, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go camping, right? But it's going to actually be, no smokes, no alcohol, no phone, no vegetarian food. We're just going to go here and actually be present. They're like, oh, I'm not going to do that. That's the same concept, right? They're literally, you're still out there sleeping in a tent. You're still catching up with what are going to become new mates and new friends.
So true.
But there's this thing that's really interesting about how men operate in this unhealthy. They're comfortable in the unhealthy without knowing it's unhealthy.
And I would say, I would add to that by saying, well, absolutely, it's a great pickup in terms of the the irony of that. And yet, in the first scenario, they're going out on country. Well, they're not actually. They're just going camping with a whole bunch of beer and esky and a motorboat and a whole bunch of drugs and disconnectors, as we call them. And in the second scenario, they're doing something very different. They are actually reconnecting with themselves on country. So it is truly what I'd call land-based healing. And it's no surprise that the First Nations in this country have deep wisdom that dovetails beautifully into our gatherings. And again, we have tremendous gratitude for guys like Will Austin, proud Peak-Wurrung, Corée-Wurrung man, and Uncle Ted Egan Lovett, Dja-Dja-Wurrung and Gunditj Mara man, and Uncle Rick Nelson and his father before him, Uncle Brian, proud Dja-Dja-Wurrung men, and how they have seen what we're doing and have welcomed in what we're doing and are really supporting us. So, they've been connecting in a deep way to country on this land for 80,000 years. They've got a pretty good idea of how to do it. And so in doing so, I like to think, well, it's clear they have formed an incredibly deep connection with themselves through that, with each other. So with country, with Jundak, with all the birds and animals and waterways, the natural world, the spirit, their ancestors, their Matingi Kulimara. And so, we're learning from our First Nations brothers and sisters and aunties and uncles and the elders around us. And they're helping to show us the way. And in some way, we're supporting them on their journey and helping to show them the way as well, and opening up what is their country for them to do their work on as well. And symbiosis seems to be a sub-theme that's working its way through here. What a beautiful thing that we might listen deeply and learn from our First Nations brothers and sisters, and that we might also have something to offer them to help deal with the tremendous injustice and the tremendous trauma that for many generations they have had to deal with and are still dealing with today. So
absolutely. My first, it's an interesting thing because in the last few years, I've actually been, I'm the first to put my hand up and say I was definitely ignorant, privileged white man. And so my through the gathering, man, and seeing what yourself and Andrew and Will have been able to do and have a chance to connect to Will has led me to be able to connect with other, beautiful, First Nations man and just sit and listen and try to learn and see what we can do to support them. But, as I spoke about in the story, my first opportunity to actually have a smoking ceremony and actually understand the power of that and the cleansing of that, and being understander and have that, the smoke of the gumleys and the cherry ballad and all that beautiful stuff just coming through you and under the feet and everything else. It was an amazing experience. And the first one had Will, with Dj in the background, just basically playing a beautiful healing sound as we're going through that is amazing. And I think that's what we want to be able to do is, again, how do we understand it doesn't have to be a this and a that? Like, it's okay to sit there and go, what we've probably been learnt and taught and conditioned to believe, actually may be wrong, but that's okay. It's okay to go. It doesn't matter what age you go. Maybe I've been ignorant. Maybe I've been going a different path, and just learn to take a step back and learn to listen and learn to every time you go out camping or you go out somewhere on country, it's like just understand that's already filled with ancestor. It's already filled with story. It's already filled with love and connection, and it'll talk to you and it'll let you know where you can and can't be and everything else. And as white men, we can have access into that as long as we're willing to open up and go on the journey and learn and be taught as we go along that path. And you and Andrew do it really well, because you incorporate a lot of that into the gathering weekends as we go along.
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
for me,
absolutely, and thanks for picking up on some of those details. And it's really important for us. We are doing men's work, and we're doing men's work on absolutely privileged to be doing men's work on Dja-Dja-Wurrung country. And so it goes without saying for me, and it's something that I've always felt that I needed to do, was to reach out to the elders of that country and ask for their guidance and their permission to do what it is that we're doing, and to follow very basic protocol of it's not being polite, it's doing the right thing. And so people often say to me, oh, so how did you meet an elder? Like, how do you do that? Well, I pick up the phone, find a phone number, pick up a phone and call them, or go and knock on a door, and introduce myself, because at the very least, surely they deserve that, to understand what it is that we're doing, and for us to be able to learn from them. And in the way in which we have been privileged to be working with First Nations people through the work that we do, First Nations elders, it's just been so important that they are involved in doing this. We're not doing this for them. And through this, so wherever possible, we have elders out on country, and we recognize them and their energy and their time. So we look after them. We feed them, we house them, we pay them for their time. It's amazing how many times elders are asked to come out on country to do welcome to country ceremonies, and they're not paid. That bit's forgotten because the elders coming out to do the ceremony, and somehow it just gets bypassed, and it's bizarre how that happens. But it's so important to us that they and their culture is respected deeply, and that where possible, if they feel to be a part of what it is that we're doing, and they can come and bring their ceremony to us, then we do that. And where that's not possible, and it's certainly been the case through COVID, where it was so vital to protect their communities, but in particular their elders, then there's some protocols that we've been asked very clearly to do to ensure that the country is safe and that the men are safe. And so we listen very carefully and we follow those protocols because they're expected of us, and we acknowledge country. Obviously, we can't welcome to country; it's not ours to welcome them into. But there are some basic protocols that we've been asked to follow, which are about respect for country and safety for ourselves and the men. And so we follow those very, very closely. And now that the COVID period is feeling a little more perhaps like it's behind us rather than in front of us, cross our fingers, touch wood and all that stuff, then hopefully that will usher in a period where we can have more and more of our First Nations brothers and sisters, aunties and uncles involved in this, and maybe where they can also have the space and time to do their work with their young ones out on country, that bit of country.
Absolutely agree. One of the things I wanted to just go back on, and I think this is where I still like to remove what I think is still confusion and everything else, because we've talked a bit about healthy masculinity.
Yeah.
And people confuse masculinity with patriarchy.
Hmm.
And so you have this, there's like, why are you doing all this, supporting men and promoting men? Like, it's a patriarchal society or it is, and, where's the diversity and everything else? And so I think it's really important because when we stand up these men's groups and everything else, people sometimes can align them back into, again, that disconnected men's club, that men's only type of thing, or, that's sort of known maybe in corporations and everything else that, you're part of the clique. And
Yeah.
so, I always like to go back and sort of get, particularly someone like yourself who, has this beautiful connection to land, country, First Nations, but you're also doing a lot of work in the corporate space and everything else about, how do you go about helping someone understand that healthy masculinity is actually something that helps break down the walls of patriarchy as opposed to a supporter of that environment, if that makes sense?
That's a great question. And you know what? I would say it's a very fair suspicion for men and women to have of all sorts of men's work, a fair suspicion. And I say it's a fair suspicion because the wheels of patriarchy are very much alive and well, and they still govern most of what goes on. Women are very much second-class citizens in the corporate world. There is still this a very thick glass ceiling for women in this country and worldwide. And the challenges are really there against them. And so, from my perspective, it's something that I take very seriously, the work that we're doing. It's not something that I enter into lightly. But from my perspective in my life, in relationship with the feminine, with women in relationship in my life, I have noticed one thing to consistently appear, and that is the damage that men have done to women that I have been in intimate relationship with, the scars that these women carry. And so part of the I guess the impetus, the energy, the drive, the passion for doing this sort of work is to say, hang on, what's the crux of the issue here? Is it that these women carry this trauma and therefore they have this problem and they need to go and do their work? No, not really. So much of this is caused by what the masculine has brought by it's big stuff, it's huge stuff. It's some of it's small and some of it's massive, but there's very much an injustice and there's very much an imbalance. And my sense clearly is that for me, I needed to go to the heart of the issue, to the core of the problem, which is actually holding up a mirror to men and their behavior. Okay, so that they might listen more deeply to themselves first and foremost, and that we might listen more deeply to our partners. Yeah, that we might listen more deeply to our partners, men and women, and that in doing so, we might find a deeper place of love for ourselves, and therefore love our mothers, love our daughters, love our sisters, love our partners, love this earth in a deeper, more respectful, more beautiful, more connected way. And so that's my take on it. Patriarchy is alive and well. We need to shoot it down. We need to take the sledgehammer to it. And through the sort of work that we're doing, we're not going to change the world, but we may well change men, one man at a time, or small groups at a time. And we call it the ripple effect, and we see it. It happens, and it's visceral, and it's exciting because men leave our gatherings and they are connected with themselves in a way that they've not been for a long time, or perhaps ever. They're connected with a circle of brothers in a way that they have never been, that they didn't allow themselves to be, through a whole bunch of reasons of fear, usually. And they're connected to country and to First Nations wisdom, as we've just spoken about. And they're connected to their families, and to their work colleagues. But the people that they love most in the world, they are connected to in a deeper way. And they see them and they hear them in a way that is more heartfelt, is more present, and is deeper. And that's a gift. That's a gift to those men. that they've given themselves, and it's a gift to their families and to their loved ones, to their partners, because that's how we smash patriarchy. We smash it from the inside out.
No, I agree. The path to remove patriarchy is to come from the heart, not from the head. And on that, and for all the men out there who would sit there and go, no, we're now, equality's here, and and all these sorts of things. I'll ask every man, just go and ask your mother, your sister, your wife, your daughter, your niece, do you feel safe walking on your own down the street at 11 p.m. at night?
Yeah.
Ask that one question. If you ever think that, because if any of those go no, therefore they don't feel safe. And if they don't feel safe, it is because of the perception of men, or what men are doing, or this patriarchal society, or this tyrant society, or men acting out of their boyhood traumas in a sense of power.
Yep.
And so as soon as any one of those people say to you, no, I do not feel safe, then we have a remit to work out and go, what do I need to do as a man to help you feel safe in society?
Yep.
And the more men that can actually be willing to do that, and that may be the fact that that's not the problem isn't outside of us.
Yeah.
And that's the second thing, is that when that happens, then we start to look at all these other people who are doing things wrong. You can be that catalyst to change. You can be the stone that creates the ripple in the ocean or in the pond. Because if you start to do the work and understand what's happening in the role you're playing,
yeah,
and then you can call out others, but call them out from love, not from that point of view. So that's would be the thing I would probably suggest out there as well.
Absolutely, Stephen. And you know what? Everyone knows a woman who has been raped. No one seems to know a rapist. And I know that's hard hitting, and it's a huge, big, deep hole. It's a deep, frightening space. But we owe it to ourselves. We owe it to the women to actually confront the problems, so that when we ask a guy, how you going? And he crosses his arms and starts drawing pictures with his toe, going, yeah, mate, all good, all good. We know it's not all good. We know it's not all good. We know so often that these men are not in their center. And at their very best, they're loving, connected, beautiful brothers. And at their very worst, they are violent. Men can be incredibly violent. And I'm not saying it's that there isn't crossover through the gender around, what can happen in sexual violence, but somehow we're on that topic, and in the end, we've got to own it. We've got to own it. We've got to own that we are failing ourselves and we are failing our women, and we need to change it. And that's what we're doing. And it's been an interesting thing through Gathering Men that on a number of occasions we've been going 7 years or so now, and each year after the men's gatherings, we've had calls from partners of those men who ring up and go, hey, we haven't seen Stephen like this since the kids were little. Or, we don't, Brett just seems to be, operating on a different vibration. He listens. He doesn't interrupt me. And these women who called were specifically asking us whether there was something for the women. Can we have some of this as well? And we put this out there to our community to say, hey, there's this demand from the women for something that is perhaps the equivalent of what we're offering at Gathering Men. Something, I'm sure, very different from what it is that we're offering, but something that can hold that safe container that will allow women to be able to come out and do their healing on country. And two women heard that call, and two very beautiful, special, wise women stood up and stepped forward. And so Lee Trafford and Jackie Van Heerden are leading that work now under the title of Gathering Women, and they're doing amazing work, and they're going from strength to strength, absolutely from a place of love in their hearts. And they are offering these gatherings that go incredibly deep, again, in a place that is safe, that is welcoming, and that is truly loving, and in a way that's going to be very different from the men. I don't know exactly what it is that the women bring and what they do and the way in which they weave their magic. But they do weave magic. I've seen the result of it. My own woman has been along to gathering women. And so I would encourage the men who are listening to this podcast, who are here in Victoria or in Southern Australia, to offer that to their women, to jump on the website gatheringmen.org and just see when the next women's dates are. I know there's one following our next autumn gathering in late March going into April, there on Dja-Dja-Wurrung country, and one prior to that up in New South Wales in the Nimbin area. So, we're not the ones that get to have all the fun and to drop all our we're not the only ones who get to do that. The women now have an opportunity to do that too, and to help heal themselves, and in much the same way that we're talking, to help feed back into their families in a way that's rejuvenated and regenerated, and connecting with their men in a more loving, heartfelt way. And hey, what an amazing thought that the men might be doing their work and might be leaning in a way that might scare them, that might bring them into fear, but might genuinely bring more connected, more beautiful, more heartfelt men to the table. And that the women, that we might meet our women, that we might meet our partners there in that place, and just hold a little more gentle, softer space for one another.
Yeah, and that's such a beautiful, I think, vision about those two coming together. And I know something myself and Jackie, my wife, we're working exactly on our own stuff, and we're learning to be less codependent, more independent, go off and work on your own stuff. And then when you do that, the power in when you come back together is so good, because you're then not dependent on each other. You're choosing to actually actively be with each other, and you're actually making that choice on a daily basis. And you're then in a much more powerful, supportive environment. And for me, it's huge. I just want to take a little tangent, because in one of the things you're talking about, particularly around the men and the safety and everything else, and this podcast is a bit about talking about being vulnerable and so forth. And one of the experiences I had, again being hosted by Brett and Andrew with the Gathering Men, was that we had a bit of a gathering and a bit of a session down near one of the dams on the property. And effectively, I think it was 20 odd men, and, combination of board shorts and everything else. But next thing is like, okay, basically we're going to go for a swim in the dam for a bit of a cleanse. And so, the option is stay in your board shorts or strip off. And so I chose to strip off. And one of the things that I shared later on that day, which people weren't aware of, was that was the most frightening thing I have done. Like, I've done a number of things, but the frightening thing was to actually strip off in front of other men and be fully naked and going for a swim, due to a whole lot of issues in relation to body shape, penis size, and everything else. And so there are those smaller things sometimes that men that we all hold on to, and then being able to share that later on with other men. Just that simple thing of not only not keeping the fear to yourself once you've confronted it, actually then talking to someone else to say, I'm going to actually open up about the fact that this was a fear and I went through it and this is what came out of it. And would I be comfortable going to it again? No, it's still going to take some effort to strip off and keep jumping in. But we know that every time we do that and we step into that, it becomes less and less and less. And so, for me, there was no judgment. It was just guys that, if you chose to swim naked, you did. If you chose to swim in your board shorts, you did. It wasn't like people were looking and going, well, come on, get your gear off type of thing. But it was all about every person that had a chance to step into that, but enabled people to feel empowered as to where they wanted to go and have that conversation. So again, I know that Brett and Andrew, I think the 24th to 27th of March, have I got the dates right for your next Gathering Men?
Yep, end of March, followed the next week by the women.
So all I would say is that this episode and Andrew's will be certainly well and truly aired by then. But if you're listening to this at any other point in time, the guys are on this beautiful autumn and spring events, 2 and 3 night events out on country, and could not recommend it more. I think I made a mistake on a thing. I think I said I left out, I could not recommend it anymore. I think I said on one of ones I could not recommend it. And Brett put it up there. I'm like, oh shit, no, that's not what I meant. Like, seriously, I would recommend everybody to go and spend, time after time, just going out there and having that opportunity, because the space they hold is just absolutely beautiful.
Well, thank you, man. Thank you for saying that and for sharing your story there, which I hear you, mate, because you spoke to your fear, one of the greatest fears, and I just hear courage. I just hear pure courage for you to do that, because, you know, part of the trademark of what it is that we do is everyone has a choice. You know, you don't have to do anything if you don't want. You don't have to talk. You don't have to speak about what's going on for you. You don't have to do anything. There is nothing that is forced. And so, you know, what happens in a safe, welcome, loving container when you're not forced to do anything, then men, it turns out, are able to open up, and they're able to step into their genius. They're able to step into their healing, and they're able to be vulnerable. And so, wow, what a thing what a story to hear, and what a great example of what was happening for you, you know, that allowed you to just shift a little and to step into that vulnerability and to meet something that was truly big for you, and maybe, you know, nothing for another fella, and be allowed to allow that to flow, you know, and in doing so, you know, the beauty of this vulnerability is that it so often provides seriously deep permission for other men to follow suit, or to de-suit, or to open up, to talk about their deepest emotions. But whether it's getting a kid off and having a swim in a dam, or talking about your deepest fears one-on-one with someone, or in circle, what a way to actually release what no longer serves us, to step into looking truly at the things that are getting in the way, the stuff that is better let go of, and to focusing our energy and our attention. And as Andrew always says, where attention goes, energy flows. So let's bring our attention to the things in our life that we truly love. And so much of our work is very much about that. It's about focusing our lives on the things that we love. And I'm sure you heard lots about that with Andrew last week.
Excellent. Thanks, Brett, for that. That's a beautiful wrap up. As I sort of spoke to you pre getting on this thing, you know, one of the things, although that is such an awesome message anyway, but just as we wrap up, is there any like a message like for men and for women out there? But, you know, this podcast is trying to help men step into that level of vulnerability, have that courage, move, you know, step in and go, I'm going to take accountability and some responsibility for what's happening with me. Is there any other, you know, little thing that you would like to leave out for the men before we wrap up?
You know what? There is something, and it's a quote that I often share, and it was taught to me by the late great Peter Malcolm, who was a man who actually introduced Andrew and I, and a man that I have deep love for, and who absolutely walks and travels with me. And it's a quote about beginning, because in the end, we don't care really where you're doing your work, whether you're coming out on country with us, or sitting in an online meeting with us, or whether you're with another men's group somewhere else, or doing one-on-one work with a coach or mentor or counselor. As long as you're doing your work, and the importance there is to begin. And so this quote is from a guy called William Hutchinson Murray, and it's from a 1951 book called The Scottish Himalayan Expedition. And it's very much about beginning. And it goes like this. It goes, until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back concerning all acts of initiative and creation. There is one elementary truth, that ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. And here it is, that the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from that decision, raising in one's favour all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance, which no man could have dreamed would have come his way. Whatever you can do or dream that you can do, begin it. For boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now.
Beautiful. I love that.
I just love that quote. I just love it. It is so, it's not debatable. It's so clear. Spoken from a man who obviously experienced that, you know, in his expeditions.
Awesome. What a great way to finish up. Brett, thank you. It's been an enlightening and enjoyable, just a fun, great conversation to have. I'm so glad that you chose to, sign up to say yes, you'd jump on the podcast, that you'd actually sit down for us to have this chance to have this one-on-one conversation. Like always, I just love being in your company. I love the conversations that we end up having, and I'm sure that the listeners would absolutely just, hopefully go back over and over this episode, because again, you go back a couple of times and go, there's another nugget, and there's another nugget, and there's another nugget. So yeah, thank you very much for your time this today, and it's been very generous.
Such a pleasure, mate. Such a pleasure to talk to the unearthed man, or maybe I'm the unearthed man. I don't know. Maybe we're both unearthed men. And to all the unearthed men who are listening out there, thanks for listening. And absolutely, we would welcome you into that safe container that we've been talking about, and love to see you around a fire sometime.
Awesome. Thanks, man. You have a great day, and we'll catch up soon.
Thanks, Stephen. See you, brother.
Hey all, look, what an amazing conversation. As you picked up, as based on the intro and as we've gone through, you can just see where Brett comes from. He just has this love and this passion, and just for helping people just discover their hearts, just to, I think, as he said to me a few times before, just leave the stories behind. That's all they are. The stories we can leave behind. It's, what are we going to lead with now, and where we're going to go to it. And the quicker we can get down and just open our hearts and run from our hearts, the much more powerful we become as individuals, and the much more powerful that we can start to impact all those around us. So I love that conversation. And the one thing I forgot to remind Brett is that, he still owes me a surfing expedition. So myself, he and Andrew need to get out on those surfboards again and have a bit of fun. All right, so as I've sort of said a few times, don't forget 8-week men's empowerment program. Certainly jump on that. Happy to jump on a one-on-one call for us to even sit down, just if you just need some thoughts or someone to listen. Happy to make that happen as well. You can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And if you want to find anything else that's going on, you can also jump in, use the links below. I'll also put a link to the Gathering Men events. So it depends when you're listening. If this one doesn't land for you, then they have regular events and regular online conversations as well. So I highly recommend that you jump on that. So I'm going to wrap up now. Episode 56 of the Unearthed Man. Sending you much love, care, and peace. Take care, and chat soon.